done recently. Actually, there were a series of studies. So we have a survey, which is like the second release on election issues. About 3 weeks ago, we released some data on the presidential contest, but on the same survey, we had put some questions on election issues. Basically, the content talked about, are you a registered voter? Do you intend to vote in the next election? And what is the integrity rating for the next election in terms of, do Kenyans feel that the next presidential elections will be free and fair? So that information is from a national survey, and we're going to present that first. Then after that, we shall go to the county section. Now the counties are 3, and we've done research in 3 counties, and that is Nairobi, Moronga, and Busia. And in those 3 counties, the focus is the race, gubernatorial race, senator race, and the women rep race. In addition, in each of these counties, we've asked the most popular political party, and we've also asked if elections are to be held today, who would the residents of those counties vote for? Now, of course, for president, thank you. Of course, there are questions on in terms of why did we select those 3 counties. Let me start with Nairobi. Nairobi being the capital city is a very important city in terms of who's going to be the next governor, senator, and women rep, and so on. And therefore, Nairobi obviously has to be on the list. And then there's been a lot of discussion about the western region of this country in terms of how competitive it has become in the western region. You've seen the number of races and the number of rallies that have actually happened in western Kenya. And what we decided was to pick one county in western Kenya and basically focus on the situation there. We feel that in terms of the race in that particular region, Busia is quite competitive, and that's why we selected Busia. Now the other county we selected is Moronga, which is in central. At the moment, I think the number of people who are aspiring to be governor of Moronga is very, very long. The list is long. But most importantly, we have very big names who are aspiring to be the governor of Moronga. And that's a mountain, and it is there's a perception that maybe the next running mate will come from that region. So we thought Moronga is basically important in terms of us having it and assessing what the situation is there. So those are the 3 counties, and that's what we'll be presenting. Now, what we would also like to indicate is that as a way forward in terms of financing, what we normally do in terms of this kind of research is that we do an omnibus survey. An omnibus survey is where there's a questionnaire and various people load questions on the survey on unrelated matters to politics, and then at the end of the survey we add the political questions, and that's where we're getting the 2022 election issues. Now, in terms of the 3 counties, we have decided that on a regular basis we shall be identifying counties that we think are very competitive, and we shall be polling and publishing these results. And those ones we're doing for the sake of it, basically informing the publics in various areas or counties on the most popular people. Now, the presentation today will not be made by me. It will be made by Dr. Tom Wolf. And before I just call him, I just want to also talk about the methodology. Of course, we're coming off a season where COVID was very, very intense, where the numbers are very high. So what we've done in this particular survey, we've done a mixed method. When COVID was very, very high, we were doing a lot of telephonic interviews, and we did that because we have a very good database of telephone contacts that are spread across the country. Now, where we fall short of the numbers, we actually do face-to-face. And what you've seen today is that, and you're going to see, is that there's going to be a combination of methodologies that are shared for the counties. So the counties, we decided to do most of them face-to-face to ensure that the spread of the contacts was well done across the various constituencies. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Tom Wolf, who's not a stranger to you guys and the general public. He's a renowned researcher, has
gave out the first release. We did that at a hotel in town in February, just 1 week after that survey, the data collection was completed. But today you get a package, you get not just a second set of results from that national survey, but as Maggie said, results from 3 county surveys. And I think she explained very clearly why those 3 particular counties were picked for this first examination of the evolving election situation in the country. And we hope that between now and the election, we may not cover all 47 counties, but at least on a regular basis, we'll be giving you a picture of what the situation is at the county level. Of course, now it's still a bit early. We haven't had party nominations. You'll see some names are mentioned by people in a particular county in connection with more than one contest, such as the same name showing up for the race for governor and the race for senator and so on, because the ballot menu has not been printed yet. So let me begin with the results from the national survey, which as shown is from this is the second release. The general methodology that was used is shown there. And you may notice that we divided our results, or divided the country into 9 different zones, which do not represent the old 8 provinces, obviously, so that some of those zones are the same as the old provinces, like Nairobi, Western Coast, and Nyanza, and so on, but several others we reconfigured to try and reflect the reality on the ground in terms of where politicians are targeting particular vote baskets or concentrations of votes. And here you can see which of the 47 counties end up in which of our 9 regions, if you want to refer to that when you're doing your reporting. I should also say before I begin that those of us who do this kind of work, although we're very proud of our work and we're always trying to improve the work that we do in terms of questionnaire design, data collection, and data analysis, we are generally happy when we see other survey firms are also producing their results, as long as they adhere to the scientific and ethical requirements of this type of work, because it gives the public more of a choice to compare one poll with another, and rather than just have to depend on one firm or 2 firms. So we wish there were 15 or 20 different companies doing this, but the Kenyan economy being what it is, we know we can't have that many. But we like a competition. We think just like in football or marathons, competition is good. It makes you try harder. So as Maggie said, the first section here is on voter registration issues. When we interviewed our national sample, we found that about 9 out of 10 of our respondents claimed to be registered voters. And you can see that across age groups, as you would expect, the younger you are, the less, or the lower proportion of those respondents who claim to be registered. Mainly, we found because of an issue of having IDs. And when we get to the age group that I'm in, 45 years and above, you can see almost all Kenyans claim to be registered. However, as a note, when we looked at the figure reported by IEBC of 22.1 million registered voters up to now, and we compare that with the 2019 census figures plus additions for the population increase that has taken place in the last 2.5 or 3 years since 2019, we see that only about 82% of Kenyan adults are registered. So that raises the question, if our sample is representative of the Kenyan population, why would we end up with a figure of 91% that's higher than the 82%? Does that mean that somehow we were missing more people who are not registered? Or does it mean that some of our respondents were cheating a bit? To say that they're registered maybe when they're not. But when you're asking people some questions, you can't challenge them. We're not at the stage now where we can ask people to show us on their phones what's their registration number or whatever. We might do that closer to the election to find a way of making sure that people that we would include in a survey would be registered. For this survey, because there were many other issues covered besides the election, we had no reason to exclude those who, at least that is the 9% who said they were not registered. Partly because it is still possible to get registered if people make the effort over the next few months, so we wouldn't want to leave them out. On a regional basis, in terms of, again, self-identification as registered voters, we found a high in our sample from Western of 97% and a low in Coast to just 81%. And I think we would ask those people who are on the ground in these parts of the country whether these figures reflect what they believe to be the case, and in particular, why people at the coast would have a lower level of interest in getting registered or more difficulty in getting registered even if they wanted to. But that would require on-the-ground research. For those who said they were not registered, that is, they're not, this 9%, there was only 55 people, but we asked them why. And you can see the distribution of reasons that we got. The plurality, and I always like to explain the difference between plurality and majority. Majority, you know, is 50% plus 1. Plurality is simply the highest or the largest figure in a group of figures, even if it is not over 50%. So the plurality here in this pie chart you can see is 44%, where those who are not registered and said they have no interest in getting registered, the reason they gave is they have no interest because, in their view, elected leaders don't keep their promises. Another 13%, at the bottom, they said they don't have an interest because they think elections are usually rigged. Another 13% might have an interest, but they said they were too busy, or they will be too busy. Another 10% said they don't have an interest. Reason given, there's no real difference between the candidates, as far as they could tell, in terms of if they got elected, what they would do. And for this question, we did not make any distinction between presidential candidates, gubernatorial candidates, and so on. It was just wagombezi, kwa jumla, as to why these people were not interested. And we think for those who are engaged in civic education, or voter education specifically, those who think it's better for a democracy if more people register to vote and more people also vote, they would want to explore some of these reasons in more detail. Maybe by going out and doing their own research and having some focus groups and so on. And by the way, as we know from past elections, just because you're registered doesn't mean you're going to vote. Voter turnout is another issue, which we'll be looking at as we get closer to the election. Again, among those who, when we ask them, how likely it is do you think you will actually vote? Among those who are registered, if we just took those who said that they certainly will not vote, or they probably will not vote, that was 9%. These are the reasons they gave. The plurality is that they're not satisfied with the parties or the candidates. Another 18% said they don't think their vote would make any difference for whatever reason. 17% said they weren't registered. 9% a lack of faith in the free and fair election. and so on. And some wouldn't answer the question, which is NR, no response at the bottom, 10%, and another 9% wouldn't give a particular reason, either because they were shy to tell us the reason or they weren't clear in their own minds why it was that they don't have an intention of actually voting, even if they're registered. Okay, the next election topic we came to is party nominations, and we know this is looming on the horizon. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the Registrar of Political Parties, Mr. Indiritu, it was announced, and also by IBC, that these nominations will take place, I think, between 9th and 22nd of April. Is that correct, or am I wrong? Does anyone know? Well, if that's wrong, you can correct me before we finish, but I think it's next month. And when we asked people, do you intend to participate in the nomination elections of any political party? We got half of Kenyans who said yes, 49%. Almost a majority, but not quite, still just a plurality. But when we correlated these answers among those respondents who self-identify with any particular party, we find that 2/3 of those who identify with UDA, actually that second question at the bottom is incorrect. It shouldn't be which one, it should be, as shown in the title, by supporters of the main political parties and none, so we should delete that one at the bottom. So UDA supporters are most enthusiastic about participating in their party nominations, 2/3, as I said. Those who self-identify with smaller parties is about the same percentage as those who identify with ODM, just over 50%, 56 and 55. Only half among those who identify with Wiper say they will participate. And interestingly, 1 out of 5, 21% of those respondents who, as of now, or at the time of the survey, when we asked them which political party do you support or feel close to, they said, Hakuna chama chochote, and yet 1/5 of them still say they would like to participate in party nominations, of whichever party. And then when we asked those 49% which political party they would like to participate in, and you know the rules are now very strict, that you can only participate in the nominations of one party based on the official list of party members that are sitting with the Registrar of Political Parties. Again, you can see half the sample intend to participate in UDA nominations, slightly over a quarter in ODM, and you can see the distribution of the other parties. It will be interesting to see if anybody violates the law and tries to participate in the nominations of more than one party. I can remember around the time of the 97 elections when I was taking tea at a hotel in town, and a group of about 30 gentlemen came in to also have chai and mandazi there, and I asked them where they were coming from. They said they were coming from party nominations, and then when it reached a certain time, the leader said, "Hi, Abbas, tuingie gari twende." I said, "Where are you going now?" And they laughed. They said, "We're going to another party now. We participate in any party that pays us." But you can't do that now. Things have changed. And then after that, I'm sure they would have some more tea and mandazi. Yeah, you can see the notes there. Okay, and then as Maggie had said, the third election issue, we asked people about their perception as to the level of integrity that the forthcoming presidential election will have. We know that in terms of election petitions and so on, there can be, and there have been challenges for elections for the other 5 positions, not just for president, but the focus in the media through statements that have been made at campaign rallies has mainly been on the issue of the presidential election. More in the last month, especially from the DP's speeches and his people raising the question about rigging, since we did that survey. So this is something we want to be tracking very carefully between now and the election in each additional survey that we do. But when we ask the general question, how confident are you that the forthcoming presidential election will be free and fair? Only slightly more than 1/3, 37%, expressed complete confidence. Another 1/3, somewhat confident, and the remaining 1/3 either not confident at all or weren't sure about this one way or the other. And I think in a country, any country, which has had problems in the election results for president being accepted, this, I think, is a cause for worry. We would like to see that complete confidence over 90%, if not 100%, so that people have confidence that the election will have the sufficient integrity. Although I must say that even in my home country, the U.S., after the last election, where the loser, the then incumbent Donald Trump, has been claiming, and his supporters claiming, that the election was stolen, these figures in the U.S. now, especially among Republicans, Donald Trump's party, I don't think are very different from this. Many do not have confidence in the integrity of the next election. So it's not only in a young democracy such as Kenya where such an issue is important, and especially for those who are dealing with election integrity, starting with the IEBC, but also with political parties and the judicial system, and all leaders really, including not just political leaders, but religious leaders. We hope that this will encourage them to address this issue so that by the time we do our next survey, those who have complete confidence are more numerous than they were 1 month ago. I showed you before, we had a question, how certain are you that you will actually vote? And here we divide our sample into two categories: those who said they will definitely vote or probably vote, and then those who said they will definitely or probably not vote. And you can see that total, 83% said they will definitely or probably vote. Only 9% said they will probably not vote or definitely not vote. But when we then, as I say, correlate these with the level of confidence that people have in the integrity of the forthcoming election, you can see pretty clearly that the more confidence that people have that the election will be free and fair, the higher the percentage is of those who say they will go and vote. I mean, why should you go to your friend's house for dinner when you know that there's no food? Kama hukuna chakula, utakubali kulipa mahali? No. So you can see, among those who are completely confident the election will be free and fair, those who will definitely or probably vote are at 89%. Those who are not confident at all, it's down to just 71%. It doesn't mean none of them will go and vote. Between 2/3 and 3/4 are still prepared to vote, but that difference between 89% and 71%, it shows very clearly that the more confidence that people have that the election will be free and fair, that their vote will count, the more likely it is that they will take the trouble to stand in a long queue, no matter what the halianga, the weather is, and on 9th of August and so on, to go out and vote. So looking at the previous slide, this question about confidence is not just something that's hypothetical, that's just abstract. It relates very clearly to the predictive or predicted behavior of people, in this case, voters. So again, we hope this will be useful to those who are interested both in election integrity and in voter participation to see what can be done to raise the expectations of confidence, of complete confidence in the electoral process. Again, when we correlate this with some of the data from our first release on what of our supporters would like DP William Ruto to be the next president or former Prime Minister Raila Odinga to be the next president. We see no huge contrasts here, but something that's very interesting that I hope you notice, that among those who are completely, or put it this way, among the supporters of Raila, there is a higher percentage who have complete confidence in the election integrity, 47%, whereas those who support the DP, only 40% have that complete level of confidence. And if we get to the other end of the scale on not confident at all, and overall it's only 20%, 1/5, who are not confident at all, that's still high, but it's the lowest figure there, we can see that a higher proportion of the supporters of the DP, 19%, than those of the former Prime Minister, 15%, are not confident at all in the election. Now, as Maggie had suggested, I have been doing survey work in this country since around 2005, although I'd been here before that doing other things. But for the 2007 election, when Raila Odinga was a presidential candidate, 2013, when Raila Odinga was a presidential candidate, 2017, when Raila Odinga was a presidential candidate, and we asked this same question. In all three of those cases, that is surveys before the election, it was the supporters of Raila Odinga who had the lowest level of confidence in the election integrity. So something has changed. And I throw that question to you and those who are following this live feed or broadcast. Why do you think it is that more followers of the former Prime Minister have confidence in the integrity of this election than do supporters of the current Deputy President, who is the second most senior person in government? Now, if you've been watching news lately, and all you people here are doing news, you could probably answer the question. But I think that's an analytical issue which needs to be addressed. I won't speculate, but I think it's important. And also, as I said a minute ago with regard to the previous slide, or sorry, two before, when you get that 1 out of 5 Kenyans say they're not confident at all in the integrity of the forthcoming election, that's worrying. Either in terms of depressing voter turnout or in not accepting the results of the election if they don't have confidence in it. So we see here there is definitely a political profile between the two main candidates in terms of this level of confidence. Okay, the second part of this presentation, also as Maggie had said, was looking at the evolving electoral contests in the 3 counties that we picked, Moronga, Busia, and Nairobi, and Maggie gave you the good reasons for that choice. So let's start with the methodology, and you can see these were 3 separate surveys. 2 were done household face-to-face, that is in Moronga and Busia. We need to put the apostrophe in Moronga there as well. Nairobi, because of the abundance of mobile phone numbers that we have, we were able to do those over the phone. And you can see the dates, more or less the same, by and large. And we don't think that any major event has happened in any of those 3 counties from the time we finished the data collection just 2 or 3 days ago that would have changed these results very much. Nobody's been accused of being, Mwizi wa ng'ombe or anything like that among these candidates. So we don't think there's any problem with the results. However, notice at the bottom, the margins of error for these smaller surveys. That is the national survey that we just presented the results from, had more than 1,500 respondents, and these are fewer, so the margins of error will be higher. So for example, for Busia, if the margin of error is slightly over 4%, if you see one candidate at 34% and another at 37%, don't say one is leading the other, because there could be a 4% difference within the statistics, either above or below. for that to be a measurable contrast in results. So which county shall we start with? Moronga. And again, as Maggie said, we asked this question about who people prefer for 3 slots. We didn't get to MCAs, obviously, there's so many. But at the county level, and I guess we should put an apostrophe after aspirants before popularity at the bottom to be grammatically correct. Since my grandmother was an English teacher, she taught me to pay attention. So we begin with party affiliation in Moronga, and you can see by far UDA is the most popular party on that part of the mountain slopes, at about 2/3 of all of our respondents who identified with that, followed by Jubilee, 6 times fewer respondents identify with Jubilee now. A few with ODM, 6%, and another 12% who don't identify with any political party. Now that can tell you one thing without any other data, and that is the party nominations with UDA, within UDA in Moronga, are going to be extremely competitive. Even before we release this results, we heard the governor of a neighboring county some months ago in Kirinyaga say, mimi nitaweka masikio yangu kwa mchanga alafu nitajua nitaungana na chama gani. And sure enough, not long after that, Governor Waiguru announced that she was switching her party preference or loyalty and soon membership from Jubilee to UDA. So the situation in Moronga looks very similar. Maybe we can include Kirinyaga in the next round of surveys. For the governor, the current senator is far ahead of his nearest likely competitor, former MP, Jamlek Kamau, more than 20 points ahead. And interestingly, in Moronga, we only have 18% who are undecided and 2% who wouldn't identify any. Does that mean that it's impossible for Honorable Kamau to catch up with Senator Kangata in the governor's race? No, because nobody's got more than 50%, and we don't know in the end how many candidates there will actually be. But nevertheless, that is a very healthy lead. In fact, I saw in one of the newspapers a couple of weeks ago that Azimio had hired some company to do surveys, and even they said down to the MCA level. I think it was the Secretary General of ODM, Edwin Sifuna, who made the comment that was quoted in the article, saying, if in any electoral arena we find within ODM or within the Azimio coalition, there's any candidate who's got more than 20% lead over his or her next nearest competitor, we're not going to bother with nominations. We're just going to wapatia kama zawadi. So if Senator Irungu Kangata was in Azimio or ODM, he probably wouldn't have to have a nomination if that statement by General Secretary of ODM Sifuna is actually implemented on the Azimio side. We'll see how these parties run their nominations. But again, the data could change between now and next month. When we come to the race for senator, we see the race is really wide open in Moronga. Nobody's got more than about 1/5 of the support. Former Senator and I think former Ambassador Kenvi Gitura is in second place behind Joe Newtu by 7%. But just look, the undecideds and the none is nearly half of our sample. So this situation for the senatorial race in Moronga is wide open. Maybe if any of you people here come from Moronga, you might want to get into that race because there's nobody who's overwhelmingly popular. I won't ask you if you come from Moronga. And under other 3%, there were 3 or 4 other names that were mentioned, but they're less than 1%, so we just added them up and put them in other. We didn't mean to offend anyone. But for 2% or above, we showed them. And finally, when we come to the women's rep contest for Moronga, again, even more, look at that. 55% don't know, undecided. And the leader, Waithira Muithirania, in fact, we have two Waithiras there. Waithira Kibinda, the two leaders at 11 and 7%. This again, it seems to me, completely open. Why the current women's rep, Honorable Sabina Chege, is so low, I'm not sure. I think some people have mentioned her in connection with the race for governor. So we'll have to see how likely these figures are to change, especially after the nominations. Also, as you can see, we have not indicated here which political party these people are identified with, partly because we don't know. I mean, I was speaking to a former MCA from one of the counties in Coast yesterday morning. And I said, "Bwana wewe uliniahidi ukija Nairobi tunijulisha tupange chai." He said, "Oh, I was in Nairobi last week, but I was very busy." I said, "You came to Nairobi and you didn't tell me? I thought you were my friend." He laughed. He said, "No, I had to come just to change my political party because I've decided to move from where I was to another one." I won't tell you where he was or where he moved to. So people are changing parties, kila siku. Not everyone, but many are. And that's why we didn't want to give party identifications to where people are now, kwa sababu chama cha leo pengine sio chama cha kesho. That's Kenyan politics for you. And within the Moronga County, when we ask people which presidential candidate do you support, you can see between 2/3 and 3/4 for Deputy President William Ruto. Again, if we go back to political party, 69% identify with UDA, 71% support the DP. That's within the margin of error. So they're identical. No surprise. If we found that UDA was the most popular party at 71% and only 15% said they support Ruto, you'd know our research is rubbish. It just wouldn't make sense. This shows how much sense it makes. I have to take credit for TIFA, obviously. Undecided, plus none of them, only 12%. Basically, these people have made up their minds in Moronga. And that's interesting, even without knowing who the running mates are going to be for each of them, because we think that will change things a bit. And I might throw the question to you, maybe we discuss afterwards. Between Raila and Ruto, which one is least likely to select a running mate from the mountain? That's my first question to you. And my second question to you is, in terms of political advantage or electoral advantage, who has the most advantage? The one who announces his running mate first, or the one who waits to see what the other one whose running mate is and then goes second? So as we approach the deadline for sending the names of the running mates to IEBC, itazame hiyo. I don't know the answer to that question. I think there are pros and cons on both sides. To go first and say, my running mate is so-and-so. Now, the changamoto is on you to try and catch up. Or is it to wait and see what my opponent is doing? I've listened to many discussions on the media, even these morning talk shows, this morning Daybreak, Citizen, whatever. I've never heard that issue discussed. Who's got more advantage, the one who names the running mate first or second? I've heard many people talk about what is important in a running mate, to help bring votes, to help bring campaign resources, to work well with the president if you get elected, and to serve the country well if, after being elected as a running mate, God forbid there's a vacancy in the office of the president. But I haven't heard this question about who goes first and who goes second to announce. Okay, now we come to Busia, and we begin with the political party alignment. And here you can see that although ODM is the most popular party, it doesn't have the kind of overwhelming dominance that UDA has in Moronga. A little bit under 50%. Now, Azimio La Umoja, you could say, okay, that is a coalition which is really part of which ODM is a part, and even a Democratic Action Party under C.S. Wamawa is an Azimio-related party. So if we combine those three together, 46, and then 56, 65, 75, that certainly gives the pro-Raila Odinga side of politics an overwhelming advantage in Busia. But we don't know how many of these different parties are going to put up candidates. If everybody is under Azimio, so they only have one candidate of all the Azimio coalition parties, that will make things easier in terms of the, that will make them more highly contested, but that will make it less likely that pro-Raila candidates down ballot are dividing the vote among themselves so that an opponent on the UDA or the Kenya Kwanza side could win because all the pro-Raila votes or candidates below the presidential level are divided, competing against themselves. In the race for governor, we see that nominated member, Honorable Florence Mutua, is certainly the most popular, but not very close to a majority yet, about 1/3, and followed by two other fairly popular potential candidates, John Munyasi and Paul Otuoma, 19 and 17. A certain percentage undecided, or wouldn't say who they would vote for, none, 12 and 2. So I would say, whereas Honorable Mutua has an impressive lead, it's not enough to say that this election is over. Again, so much will depend on the nominations. When we come to the senatorial race, our very well-known, I don't want to call him a judicial activist, but somebody we usually see either in court or giving media interviews outside the gates of the court, whether it's at Milimani or wherever, has challenged the government on many issues, often winning, and he has got a quite impressive lead, not that far from an outright majority. So on the basis of this, anyway, with his nearest competitor, Karen Kasamu, and I must say I don't know anything about her, I apologize, I think he's in a pretty strong position to be the next senator, because I think the current senator, former Attorney General Wako, is retiring. I don't see his name mentioned yet. Undecided, don't know the candidate. They're waiting for the final ballot menu after nominations, totaling 32%. So things could change, but at the moment, I would think that Mr. Omtata is in a pretty strong position. For women's rep, pretty evenly divided, nobody in a very strong position, even if Catherine Omano has almost twice as much support as the next nearest competitor, Riziki Onyambo. The current women's rep in Busia is who? Do we know? Oh, that's right. She's the women's rep. That's right. And she was appointed to that. Pardon?
Running for governor.
Yes, and she's the governor. So that makes the race even more competitive. We were looking at that before. And the preferred presidential candidate in Busia, overwhelmingly for former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, 76%. And again, just to go back to do our political party sums, if we add 46 with 19, 56, 65, 75, within that Azimio grouping of DAP, Azimio itself, and ODM, 75. And here we have the former Prime Minister. It's within the margin of error again. So you can see this is Siku Bahatisha. Kenyans who identify with a particular party, the closer we get to election, do so because that's where the presidential candidate is that they want to vote for. So the fact that these are exactly the same within that margin of error of a couple percent, again, I think it underscores the accuracy of TIFA's research here. Makofi tafadhali. Okay, the last county, the biggest one, and as Maggie said, probably the most important one, We know that there were some suggestions over the last few years that Nairobi be separated out from the other counties and made a capital city under the direct control of the national government, the way Washington, D.C. is in the U.S. I haven't heard anybody talking about that lately. I think Kenyans have become very proud of their county governments, whatever their problems with corruption or political struggles, some impeachments and so on. I don't think Nairobians are any less enthusiastic about county government than people in Moronga or Busia or anywhere else. So I haven't heard much talk about that. Now you can see, again, how competitive at the level of political party support Nairobi is. Yes, we can combine Azimio with ODM, and we get 31%, UDA 22%. I guess we can put Jubilee together with Azimio. So the parties associated with Raila Odinga's presidential campaign are slightly more popular. Let me just do the math again. 23 plus 8 is 31. We don't know where Kalonzo is at the moment in Oka, but 2% for Jubilee. That takes it up to 33%. Undecideds, 1/3 of Nairobians decline to self-identify with any party, 35%. Whether that will change as we get closer to the election, I would think that number would decrease, but we're in the business of analyzing results that we have, not making predictions or guesses about what's going to happen. Now when we come to the race for governor, we see the current senator with a clear lead, but not overwhelming. Honorable Sakaja, who as you know is the current senator, followed by Honorable Wanyonyi, I believe he's the MP for Westlands, and the current governor who took over to fill the vacancy after Governor Sonko was removed, and Kananu coming in at third place, very close to Richard Ngatia, whose signs I see quite often driving around the city, maybe more than the others, so he seems kind of a head start with his campaigning. We also see Bishop Wanjiru there. Even 5% said they would like to vote for former Governor Sonko, although after what happened with his court appeal, final court appeal, I think, in the course of this week, in our next survey, probably if we went back to Nairobi County, his percent might go down, or he may have these supporters who would like him to be the next governor no matter what happens to him. And the current women's rep, Esther Pisaris, is also mentioned there at 2% along with Bizu. But quite a few are undecided, don't know the candidates yet. 12 plus 23%, that's 35. So I would say that even if Senator Sakaja should be happy with these results, there's no basis for him relaxing. This situation could still change when we go to the far right and see that 35% of our respondents are still wako sokoni yakura. When we come to the senator, of course, the current senator has said he's going for governor, but still more of our respondents mentioned him than anybody else. But just look at that undecideds and don't know, and a few who won't vote, 3/4. So that race for senator in Nairobi is wide open as of now, since these surveys were just done in the last couple of days. Once it's very clear that when the nominations go in and everybody sees that Senator Sakaja is going to be contesting for governor, not for senator, obviously his 8% will go somewhere, and that will give Nairobi voters a much clearer idea of what their choices will be. Ni kama kuingia hoteli unataka kuagiza chakula, lakini mpaka upatiwe orodha ya chakula na waiter, huwezi kusema mimi nataka hii au hii au hii, because you don't know what's on the menu. So that helps to explain some of this uncertainty of 75%. And when we come to the Nairobi women's rep, the current incumbent, and we've indicated that again with an arrow, Honorable Posadas is by far and away the most popular of the likely, if not certain, candidates for this position. 1/3 of those support her. But we still have nearly half, 48% at the far right, who haven't made up their minds. That's not to say that once the ballot menu is finalized, when nominations are taken to IEBC, that the percentages for all of these candidates won't go up. But I would say, again, even if Ms. Pasares has a very comfortable lead, if she wants to continue as Nairobi Women's Rep, even though her name has been mentioned in connection with the senatorial position, she shouldn't just go on holiday between now and the election. But this is a comfortable margin of some 25% over her nearest competitor, Millicent Omanga. And I believe the last slide from Nairobi on presidential popularity, presidential candidate, you can see that former Prime Minister has a significant lead over the Deputy President, but not overwhelming, with a quarter of Nairobi residents still telling us that they're undecided who they're going to vote for. As I said, maybe they're waiting to see who the running mates are. Maybe they're waiting to know more about the policies and so on. Maybe they're waiting to see how the nominations turn out. But that, again, more or less reflects what we saw. I won't do the math again, but if we go back to political parties, it's more or less, when you see UDA at about 22%, ANC is now identified through Musalia Mudavadi with UDA, and Kenya Kwanza is another 1%. So if we make the total for the parties supporting the Deputy President at around 24%, when we get to his total here, it's a bit higher. There are some people that don't identify with any party who are still saying that they would vote for him, but it's still basically proportional. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. We just suggest that when you do your media stories, aside from those you're doing live, that you check for each of these counties, and you can check census data to see to what extent the people that we interviewed are in fact an accurate representation of the population in these counties, at least in terms of gender, age, education level, and the distribution throughout the various constituencies. So thank you very much, and we'll take any questions. Anything I forgot? No. Just to repeat something that Maggie said at the beginning, and some of your viewers or readers may ask, even if both of us have explained, why we picked those three counties. As Maggie said, with the movement in Western, especially with ANC and Ford Kenya joining the Deputy President's campaign, now Kenya Kwanza, we can see a higher level of contestation there. So we just at random picked that one county, Busia, of the several counties in Western. On the mountain, because there's no presidential candidate, and we know that vote basket has been of central attention to the main presidential contenders, and of the several counties, we just picked Moronga for that, and then Nairobi because it's the capital city. But as Maggie also said, as we move closer to the election, we hope to add more counties to that list. And finally, as she said, the main national survey is an omnibus survey. Anybody who's got any questions that they want a media house or an organization that wants to load for them to have exclusive ownership of that data, or to release it in connection with us for the price of about 40,000 shillings per question. You load your questions, and as Maggie said, whether they relate to politics, the election, or health, or the economy, or insecurity, or gender issues, whatever it is, you bring your money, we'll put the questions on our next survey, you'll get the data, and you'll find out what you need to know for your organization's work, or just publicity for the work that you're already doing. And then I'll again ask if there are any questions. Yes, and please identify yourself, where you're coming from.
is Benjamin Moronga. I work for Turnout today. From your research, it shows that UDA leads in Moronga.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me just go back to that.
Okay. And from the recent political activities in the mountain, where we've seen also the president is supporting the Azimio leader, former prime minister. From your research, what does it tell about the president's influence in the mountain? Because even after trying to join forces with ODM leader, they are still training.
Well, I think your question implies the answer. When you see that, Jubilee recently had their National Delegates Conference, and yet you can see when people identify with parties, only 11% of the people in Moronga identify with the president's party. I think it shows clearly that I wouldn't say often, but it can be the case that a retiring president, an outgoing president, having served 2 terms, however popular he and his running mate, but however popular he may have been at the time he was contesting, does not tell us how much influence that individual will have as he's moving towards a new life as a private citizen. Now, much will depend on the status of or the level of popularity of the political party with which he identifies. I hope you've looked very carefully at the first release of 17th February. And if you don't have it, tell me, give me your email, and I'll make sure I send it to you when you're finished. Because we asked this question, whatever party you identify with now, and remember, UDA was the leading party in Kenya as a whole at 35%. And I think Jubilee nationally was only 4%. We asked people, is there any party in the last 10 years different from the one you support now, or even if now you don't support it, that you used to support? And if more than one, what's the most recent? And we found the biggest victim was Jubilee. And most, I think 2/3 of those who now support UDA say they came from Jubilee, which is not surprising because the DP was part and parcel of that marriage with Uhuru Kenyatta in 2012-2013 election that brought Jubilee into being through URP and TNA. So if you want to ask the question, why does the president apparently not have a huge amount of influence in Moronga politics currently, you've got 2 questions, two parts of the answer. Number one, how much has the departure of the deputy president from Jubilee caused the president's influence to go down? And looking forward, what can the president do moving forward between now and the election in particular to increase his influence? Not just in Moronga, but everywhere in the country, but especially where he was so popular in the last 2 elections. Why is it? And that's a question for a different type of qualitative analysis. Even if he says, or even if it was decided at the NDC that he is going to continue to be the Jubilee Party leader. Now, one thing we didn't ask in this national survey, or even in this Moronga one, the national survey, but maybe in the next survey we could ask, as far as you know, who is the party leader of Jubilee? Just see how many Kenyans actually know that it's the current president. Some people may not know that. Maybe there wasn't enough publicity about that National Delegates Conference, where it was decided that moving forward, even after he retires, he will continue to be the party leader of Jubilee. So we want to check and find out, are people really aware? Maybe it will take some, and maybe that, realizing that as he becomes more and more active as the party leader in Jubilee, as opposed to just being the president, or being the president, that his influence will increase. We just don't know. Maybe his influence will increase once people who supported him in the last 2 elections see who Raila's running mate is. So these are definitely questions. The reason I love your question so much it really highlights or puts under a microscope many of these issues which we've been discussing about the fluidity of Kenyan politics. That people can be in one group today, another group tomorrow. Look, in 2007, William Ruto was a strong supporter. He was a member of the Pentagon supporting Raila. And now they're competing against each other. Uhuru Kenyatta, who competed against Raila in the last 2 elections, is now supporting Raila instead of his own deputy president. Musalia Mudavadi, who was also in the Pentagon in 2007. In 2013, he stood on his own. In 2017, he was back with Raila, and now he's joined Raila's opponent. So what do these different candidates actually stand for in terms of policy alternatives that Kenyans can choose from? I can tell you, somebody like Hillary Clinton could never join Donald Trump. Obama could never link up with Donald Trump because of the level of development of American society, especially the economy, and the history of these parties representing particular policies. Over decades, we don't have people moving that much from one party to another, especially at the level of leaders. Voters, more, because different issues are more important to voters. So the stage of development of Kenya's economy and political parties make it not a surprise that we can have this level of, I mean, you can say the same thing for Kalonzo Musyoka. He stood on his own in 2007, then he went to work for Kibaki as a vice president, then he was with Raila as the running mate in the last 2 elections, and now he's refusing to support him for whatever reasons that have been given in the media. But when you see people on the deputy president's side, even, if I may mention, Senator Cherargei this morning on Citizen Daybreak saying, we would welcome the former vice president to come and join us. Whereas people on Raila's side are saying the same thing. So if people on both sides of the main political divide in the country would be happy to have the former vice president with them, what does that say about how much they differ in terms of what their policy agenda is? And again, it's not to blame them. It's the very limited duration of party politics in Kenya, plus, as I say, the structure of society. We don't have a party for wealthy landowners in this country versus another political party for the landless, or one party for those who sleep with their tummies full, and another party who sleep with their tummies empty. Aside from ethnic divisions, most of these politicians are competing for the same voters, and they're overwhelmingly poor. You saw from the first release, when we asked what's the main problem facing Kenya, by overwhelming, it's the economy, whether it's unemployment or inflation, whatever. And these are the same voters that these candidates and parties are going for. So it's not surprising they don't say, vote for me and I'll protect the rights of pastoralists. Or vote for me and my party will defend moving from fossil fuels to clean, green energy. We don't have those kinds of divisions in Kenyan society because of the level of development in the country. 2/3 of the people are still rural. Half of Kenyan families are still depending mainly on their shambas for food, about half. So the voters, in terms of what attracts them, is not going to be clear. Whatever the manifestos, people are going to want to know, and we've seen it already, which candidate or political party will most actively and successfully make my life better, starting with my economic condition. And that applies whether you're a pastoralist in Turkana, a fisherman in Kwale, a wheat grower in Uasin Gishu. You know, these issues. Now, does that mean that whoever gets elected will behave exactly the same as the other? I'm sure not. Once you get into State House and you're confronted with this huge pile of issues, I mean, how is Kenya going to make up for the shortfall in wheat because of what's been going on in Ukraine as Russia attacks? Those farmers were on television and saying, we can't plant. Even if we're not being bombed by the Russians, we can't get the fertilizer. The price of diesel that we need for our tractors has gone sky high. In Kenya, you check how much of our wheat comes from outside the country for people who eat bread. So there's going to be serious challenges, whoever becomes president, leave alone servicing the debt. These challenges will be there, and we can't say, because they're competing for the same voters, whether it's a Ruto president or a Raila president, or Odinga president, that they'll behave the same way in office. We can't say that. But it's difficult to tell in advance sometimes in some of these policies because the challenges are so difficult. We can just thank the good God that nobody's bombing us. That's a personal comment, not from TIFA. When we've done nothing, or when Ukraine has done nothing to provoke any neighboring country. But let me nitaacha siasa zangu kando. Very good question. I talked for too long. Another good question? Anyone? You get your tajiris at your TV. Come and bring some questions that you will own and you will broadcast and leave the others out because you paid for the question. Yes. Only about 40,000 shillings a question. Pesa kidogo kwa matajiri yenu. Wait, sorry. Yes. You're from where?
I'm from TV Nairobi.
Yes.
My question is in connection with the subject you have shared with us. I don't know if you asked our voters from those counties if they still believe in IEBC.
Sorry, if the voters in the county still believe in?
IEBC to conduct the general election.
No, we didn't ask that specific question. We will be asking the level of confidence in IEBC in our national surveys as we move towards the election. Even that general question, how confident are you that the elections will be free and fair, that we asked nationally, we did not ask that question at the county level. As you can see from the methodologies, for the 3 county surveys, where are they? Oh, sorry, they're at the beginning. 1 second. As you can see, the dates of data collection for these 3 counties was very few days, even if the samples were smaller. So the data collection, you can see, there was very quick, just a couple of days. So we limited the number of questions. But for the national survey, that question about confidence, we will be more specific moving forward, especially now that I saw reported yesterday that IEBC has confirmed the acting CEO, Mr. Marian, and made that job of his permanent, that I believe he has held since 2017. So now that Kenyans will know who is not only the chairman, and of course Wafula Chebukati has been there from some time, since before the last election, but also the chief executive officer of IEBC. I think they interviewed 5 people for the final sets of interviews, the chairman said. So now it's a good time moving forward to ask, how much confidence do people have in IEBC to run the election in a way that guarantees integrity? So I'm sure we'll include that in our forthcoming surveys. Another very good question. Anyone else?
Lastly,
Please.
even after Deputy and Wetanga moved to David President's side,
Yes.
Presidents of Busia seem to speak on Odinga's side. From your research, what could be the reason?
From the research, what?
From your research, what could be the reason why residents of this county decided to remain on?
Do you have a copy of our first release that we gave to the media on the 17th of February? Do you have that? You have it? Good. Because what we did, we compared the level of support for Raila, Ruto, and so on, and political parties in Western as a whole, not Busia as a county, but Western as a whole, from last November to the beginning of February when we did the survey. And we found exactly what you have just suggested, that in Western, what used to be the old Western province, the earthquake, quote unquote, of Musalia Mudavadi along with Moses Wetangula from Fort Kenya moving into the Ruto campaign team didn't produce much of a change in terms of party support or presidential candidate support in Western. Now, if you're asking me why, it's many years since I've been to Western Kenya, I must confess. In fact, since coronavirus came to Kenya, I've only made one research trip outside of Nairobi, and that was to Coast, because we had a project there. Not a political project, a different project. But I was there, able to stay there for a week and talk to people about politics. So I think that's up to you, if you're Magharibi TV, to go out or send your reporters out and ask people, how much of an impact has the decision by the former vice president under late former President Moi for a few months, and then Deputy Prime Minister under Raila, Honorable Muravati, and Senator Wetangula. Has that made an impact on your level of support for political party or for presidential candidate? You go and interview them. Hii ni kazi yako. Sorry for dodging, but I can't, unless I have data, I can tell you that there hasn't been much change. I don't have that figure right in front of me, but it wasn't very much in Western. But for the reasons, I mean, one thing I would say is before that earthquake, so-called earthquake announcement, you look at the distribution from the November survey of political party support by region and find out how popular was Ford Kenya in Western and how popular was ANC in Western. Look at those figures first. Because if I'm low on fuel in my vehicle and you come with Mutungi to niongezea mafuta, but your tank that you're carrying is only 1/4 full, you can't help me very much. So I have to know before you, I beg you to come and put fuel in my vehicle, I have to ask, sasa huu mtungi, kutupu au umejaa mafuta? So let's look at the level of political party support before in November and after these two leaders made that decision, and see what happened to their level of political support. How much were they taking? And again, if you don't have the November survey results, you give me your email and I'll send it to you when we're finished. But that's another good question. Anything else? Ama tufunge. Thank you very much for coming. And as I say, if you have need for any more details as you're doing your stories, I think you got my email address. Where is it? And also Maggie's address there, so you can write to us and ask. We don't know for certain when we're doing our next national survey, but we hope it will be before the middle of next month. But I can't promise. It depends on passengers to get on the omnibus. Kuleta pesa. Kama uko na marafiki, waambie waje na pesa alafu tutafunga safari. Thank you very much. And have a nice weekend kuanzia kesho. Kutwa.